Good evening, everyone. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll just wait a few more seconds for everybody to join. I can see you all flooding in here nicely. Hello, everyone. Great, we're still going up. Lots more people still joining. Hello, Jane Towler. Hello, Larissa. Right, I think we should just about be there. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening for the next instalment of our Naturetrek Roadshow on East Africa. My name is Georgie Head and I'm Naturetrek's tailor-made manager, and I'll be hosting this evening alongside my lovely colleagues and tour leaders who'll be presenting for you. So yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on this another cold, windy evening here in the UK. I hope that you're all comfortable now and survived the storms that have been blowing through recently. But this evening, we're hoping to sweep you off your feet in a different way as we give you some nice armchair travel about all the places that we could travel to. So we're getting lots of people at the moment sort of asking us how we think travel is going and what we think is how things are going. And at the moment, we are very optimistic. We've had lots of very successful tours going out in January and February. We've got a very busy spring season coming up. And we're so pleased to see that more and more countries are beginning to relax their COVID restrictions, which is just making it easier and easier for us to travel and yeah, making things much easier for you. So this evening, as I mentioned, we will be focusing on East Africa. So Kerrie Porteous will be kicking off this evening. She will be speaking about the bizarre and wonderful wildlife of Madagascar. Then we'll move on to Paul Stanbury, another colleague from the Naturetrek office, who will be speaking about all things Tanzania. We'll have the Great Migration and the fantastic safari opportunities there. We'll then take a 10-minute break at about 8:15, and you'll have the opportunity to go and get a cup of tea or a glass of wine and just relax a little bit between our presentations. We'll then move back to Kerrie, who will be speaking about a completely different area. We'll go to the Seychelles after that. And then finally, Neil McMahon, one of our wonderful tour leaders, will be speaking to you about Uganda. Now, the final part of the evening, we will be going through a question and answer session. So please do use the Q&A buttons at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try and answer quite a few of your questions as we go through as well, but we'll also answer them in person at the end. We've also got the chat function, so please do use that. We love interacting with you throughout the presentations and hearing about how you're finding things. So yeah, please fire away and ask us as much as you can. So that's enough from me. I will now hand over to Kerrie, who will start speaking to you about Madagascar.
Thanks very much, Georgie. So as Georgie said, my name is Kerrie Porteous and I'm one of the operations managers in the Naturetrek office. I'm a bit of a regular on these evenings now, so you may well have come across me before. But this evening, I'm talking about one of my favourite places to begin with, Madagascar. I first went to Madagascar back in 2009, and after joining Naturetrek 10 years ago now, I've been lucky enough to go back a couple of times since, leading some of our tours. It's a fantastic country. Let's get cracking. So to start off with, let's have a look at where Madagascar came from. It is today the 4th largest island in the world. It is also the oldest island in the world. So Madagascar, I'm actually going to get my little pointer going on here. Here's Madagascar, 225 million years ago, jammed inside the supercontinent of Gondwanaland. As the continent started to move apart, Madagascar was dragged away from mainland Africa by India when it was on its collision course with Asia. It smashed in there to form the Himalayas. But Madagascar was dragged away from Africa but didn't follow, so it became completely isolated off the coast of Africa across the Mozambique Channel. There are some species there that have remained there since that it was part of that supercontinent, but the island has been fantastically enriched by species that arrived since it became isolated. And that has been for the last 65 million years, so since around the time the dinosaurs went extinct. So we are talking about extreme levels of endemism today. As I said, there are some relics of that primitive Gondwana community. So some of the ferns, some of the palms, some primitive reptiles like the boas, they remain there today. But many, many species arrived since then. We think there might possibly have been a land bridge that was there about 40 million years ago that would have helped some animals cross. There are also many theories about terrestrial species rafting over the Mozambique Channel, which I always struggle to get my head around, the idea of a lemur just sitting on a bit of vegetation floating across the Mozambique Channel, but it helps think in geological timescales. And if something isn't impossible, if enough millions of years pass, then it becomes almost likely in the end. So we think that's how some of them made it across. And now we're talking about 90% of the amphibians, 70% of reptiles and plants, all the terrestrial mammals, half the birds, nearly all the insects and spiders are all endemic. So, for example, the birds. Madagascar has 6 endemic or near endemic families. So they are the mesites, the ground rollers, the astes, and the Malagasy warblers. They only occur on the island of Madagascar itself, while the vangers and the cuckoo rollers are found on Madagascar and the neighbouring island of Comoros. So that's why we call them near endemic. So these are the vangers. They're, I think, many people's favourite endemic family of birds in Madagascar. Top left is the sickle-billed vanger, also known as the crybaby vanger, because it flies overhead going wah, wah, wah. To the right is the Chabets vanger, real generalist. Here it's sat on a Didieraceae in the Spiny Desert, but you can find it in the rainforest as well. And the bottom left is the king of all the vangers, the helmet vanger. It's a beautiful bird with that enormous, fantastic blue bill. It's a tricky one to find. We do have sites, we certainly did pre-COVID, so it's possible to find them, but you've got to really want to see one, and it's a bit of a mission, but what a gem if you do. Now, some people liken the vangers to Darwin's finches, but really they're a much more extreme version of that. And what happened was one single ancestral species arrived on Madagascar, found that there were no other mid-sized insectivorous birds in existence. So it diversified and filled all those niches. And you can see it really has gone to the extremes with those bills. Darwinian finches just doesn't do it justice. Madagascar's home to half of the world's chameleons. So top left, we have the Panther Chameleon. This is found up in the north of Madagascar, very widespread up there. On the right, the excellently named blue-legged chameleon. And then the bottom left is a tiny, tiny Bruxia tuberculata, one of the littlest of the leaf litter chameleons. You can see there it's just the size of a thumbnail. Incredible, and incredible how our guides can find them. Again, up in the far north for that one. And for many, it is, of course, the lemurs that epitomize Madagascar. So there are 106 species of lemur, at least, in 5 extant lemur families, again, all descended from one single ancestral species that arrived in Madagascar after it had become isolated. I say at least 106, it changes. The earliest mention of Madagascar that I can find in a Naturetrek brochure mentions that there are at least 36 species of lemur. So in the last 30 years, we've found quite a few more. And some of that is literally finding them, and some of that is genetic divisions. So these are all Schipperkes. Their ranges don't overlap. Of the 11 different types of Schipperke, none of the ranges overlap. So in the left, we have Deccan's Schipperke, and the top, the cockerels, and then the bottom is the Perrier's beautiful black Schipperke in the very far north again of Madagascar. Meanwhile, these are the mouse lemurs. We used to think there was just one species of mouse lemur. Then they were split in 2. So the one on the left is a brown mouse lemur, and the ones on the right are reddish grey mouse lemurs. And we used to think that all the wet forest lemurs, mouse lemurs with brown mouse lemurs, and all the dry forest mouse lemurs with these reddish grey ones. Now looking at the genetics, there are more than 20 species of mouse lemur. And actually they are very distinct species, genetically quite different. The smallest of all primates is found in Madagascar, and that is a mouse lemur. That is Madame Bert's mouse lemur. So for the next 15 minutes, I am going to take you on a little journey across Madagascar. For all of our tours, we fly into Antananarivo, which is here, otherwise known as Tanna. And then for many of them, not all, but many of them, we go down the one good road in Madagascar, which is the RN7. which is this route. And it's really great that there's one good road that covers this section, because it covers some really fantastic habitats in Madagascar. You can just about see on this Google image that there's a rain shadow here. So this is the much wetter eastern part of the country where there's lots of rainforest, and this is high plateau that we travel over. And as we go west, it gets drier and drier and warmer. So we go into the deciduous dry forest, and then we end up on the coast in the spiny desert. So one road and lots of brilliant habitats. Also, this is not too bad, this bit of road to Andasave Mantadia. So we're going to this evening go Andasave Mantadia, Ranamafan, Isalo, Ifati, and we'll see how we go. And as we set off on that road, this is the sort of thing we might see. So we know from looking at languages, actually, that the first people arrived in Madagascar around 2,500 years ago. And from those languages, we think most likely they came from Borneo and Indonesia. They brought with them their tendency for rice farming, eating rice, building Asian-style two-story houses. And that's why this is quite a typical landscape that we might see as we're driving along. We know that also very soon after they arrived, Swahili-speaking people arrived from East Africa. And nowadays there are, depending on how you classify them, somewhere between 18 and 21 different cultures. But very broadly, the people who inhabit the wetlands are Asian in cultural ties and architecture, and the people who inhabit the dry lands are African in physical appearance and in their tendency to build African-style huts. And then in terms of accommodation, it's not bad. It's okay. It's nothing to write home about, but it's comfortable. It's en suite. It's generally not aircon. It's more likely to have a fan and a mozzie net, but airy rooms, decent food. So comfortable place to put your head down at night, basically. And it's worth saying at this point that wildlife viewing in Madagascar is done on foot. So there's no sitting around in safari vehicles here. We're out in the forest every day, exploring on our feet. This particular photo is taken in the rainforest, where some of the paths are quite sort of steep at times. So you can see everyone here has got walking poles, and they're quite useful, help out your knees a bit and keep you steady. You need to have a relatively good amount of fitness for a trip to Madagascar. You don't need to be, going out for a run to practice every day or anything like that. You just need to be able to walk for the morning at a leisurely pace, or you've got to really want to see a lemur. I think either of those will do, really. So let's get to some of the wildlife. So here in the rainforest, there's some wonderful birding, obviously. This is a Madagascar pygmy kingfisher. It's actually an insectivorous bird, so it's rarely found near water. We're much more likely to find it somewhere in the trees. This is a velvet asty, so that's one of those endemic families that I mentioned at the start. This chap with its beautiful green eyeliner. And this chap is a Akua. This is a red-fronted Akua. The Akuas are pretty widespread around much of central and eastern Madagascar. Mostly they're ground dwellers. They fill the niche occupied elsewhere by pheasants and by roadrunners. The Akuas is an endemic genus, and they're part of the cuckoo family. The Akuas themselves are endemic to Madagascar as well. And this beautiful bird is a pitter-like ground roller. That is another endemic family that I mentioned. There's a theme here, isn't there? So all but one of the ground rollers live in the rainforests. We'll meet the other one later on today. And because I had to put him in, here's that beautiful helmet vanger again. What a beautiful bird. One of the highlights of a trip to particularly northern Madagascar is a particularly good place to look for a helmet vanger. And there's lots more besides the birding, of course. So I mentioned at the start that half the world's chameleons are found in Madagascar. This one is a Parsons chameleon. It's an arboreal species. It's got a prehensile tail to help it cling into the trees. It walks a bit like, looks like it's a bit like a leaf. Some of them have tongues longer than their bodies. They are brilliant to watch. And this chap is a mossy leaf-tailed gecko. Let's see if you can see it. So here's his body, here's his fingers, that's his bottom of his mouth, and there's an eye there. So I will zoom in a little bit. There we go. So there's the fingers again, mouth, and there's the eye. So there's two types of gecko in Madagascar, the ones that look like moss or lichen, and the ones that look like dead leaves. And this is the second one. This is a satanic leaf-tailed gecko, Uroplatus fantasticus. This little chap is a giraffe-necked weevil. They're fantastic. They're found in a certain type of bush, so very easy as a tour leader. If you know where the bush is from year to year, then you know where to find your giraffe-necked weevils. And this chap is a comet moth. These are huge, sort of like bigger than my face big, fantastic with these long tail streamers, which serve as a defensive mechanism. If they're attacked by a bird, the bird's more likely to get the tail streamer and not an important part of the moth. And this is a barren Spantella frog, has lots of toxins in its skin. There's well over 300 species of frog, probably countless more than that, but 300 that we know of. You compare that to the one native frog in the UK. But there's no toads, no newts or no salamanders. They never made it over. This chap's a tenrec. So there's 30 species of tenrec in Madagascar. Again, all descended from one single ancestral species. There's tenrecs that are like otters, like moles, like hedgehogs, like tiny shrews, like little arboreal mice. This one is obviously filling the niche of a hedgehog elsewhere. So this is a lowland street tenrec. And we've come quite a long way through the rainforest without even seeing a lemur. So do not worry, here they are. This is a red-bellied lemur. They're pretty widespread here, really easily seen. And these ones are sexually dimorphic. So you can see that the males have got these white teardrops under their eyes. These they're known as true lemurs, these in the Lemuridae family. So they're generally on all fours and spring through the trees. This is my personal favourite lemur, the black and white ruffed lemur. They're a bit more elusive. You have to work for them a bit, but you can often hear them grunting like pigs really far away in the trees, and then you're on the right track at that point. Very, very beautiful. Quite unusual as they give birth to several young, and they live in nests together. They stay together for quite a while. And these are very beautiful shipikers. These are the diadem shipikers that we find in the eastern rainforests. And then finally around here, the Indri is likely to be the star of the show. It's the largest lemur that still lives today. We know actually that there were 3 extinct families that were all at least as big, but in today's world, this is the largest that they get. And they live in small family groups, and they have an amazing eerie howl that echoes through the forest. So it can be quite incredible just lying in your bed in the morning in your lodge, and then a mile, 2 miles away in the forest, you can hear these eerie echoing calls of the Indri communicating with each other. Now, what we might also spot is this. Not quite so exciting, you say? So this little hole, and what is conspicuously absent from the talk so far is the woodpeckers. And that's because in Madagascar, you don't get woodpeckers, you get this, aye. Now, disclaimer here, on most of our standard tours to Madagascar, you are unlikely to see an aye. They are very difficult to spot because they are very, very nocturnal. So you've got to know where a tree is, where they're living, and be out at midnight and hoping for the best. But we do have a site on our Madagascar Mammals tour where they are habituated on a little island. That is your opportunity should you really want to see an aye. And they are incredible. They've got these huge bat ears. They hear the grubs moving through the wood. They've got rodent-like teeth to gnaw at the wood, and then that long skeletal finger to dig them out. There's nothing quite like them. And very occasionally during our searches through the forest, you might get lucky and see a fossa. I would say if we run 8 tours in a season to Madagascar, 1 or 2 you might see a fossa. So it's not unheard of, but you've got to be a bit lucky as well. It gets easier as you get into November and they take to their mating trees, because one female can stay in a mating tree for a long time, receive several gentleman callers per day. And there's a particular site actually up in the west of the country where you've got a really good chance of seeing a fossa should you want to. So again, if you want to see a fossa, we know how to get you there. So we're heading east, no we're not, we're heading west across the country now, and this is Asano National Park. So we're heading off into the dry deciduous forest. And we have some really lovely lodges actually around here. Good to dry out after the rainforest, enjoy some good food, and some beautiful early morning birding around the lodge. So you get up at dawn and head out. It's really dreamy, really easy. This is a Madagascar hoopoe. This is a Madagascar kestrel. These are all birds you might just spot as you wander around. This is a Madagascar paradise flycatcher, Madagascar bulbul. These are all endemics. It's very easy birding in Madagascar. You just find your bird, put Madagascar in front of it, Madagascar magpie robin, and you've got an endemic. This is a forest or Benson's rock thrush. And this is where we're going to catch up with our first ring-tailed lemurs. These are the most social of all the lemur species. They live together in large family groups. They have a dominant female in charge. And they're just really fun to watch. We tend to go to Madagascar, in fact we always go to Madagascar between September and November, It's a good time for birding, it's a good time for the weather, and the lemurs have all had their babies in July and August, really. So by September, October, the little baby lemurs are starting to get a bit adventurous. They cling to their mum's back still, but they'll be starting to explore, learning how to leap around, playing in the trees. So they really are a joy to watch. And you can get some incredibly close encounters as well. So I said we're out on foot, and we won't ever try and get ourselves too close to a lemur if they don't look like they want it. But sometimes you can just be sat there watching them around, and they'll come to you. So you can get some really amazing close views and some really nice photos as well. There's also some interesting botany in the Salo. So this is a Pachypodium, an elephant's foot plant. Lots of baobabs too, and we'll see more as we move across the country and it gets drier. So there are 6 endemic species of baobab in Madagascar, and this is Tanzania Zar. Now we're continuing across the country here, and there's a place we can stop called Zombits National Park, and it's worth stopping if only for this one bird. This is an Apis tetraca, which you will only find in this one fragmented forest in the entire world. So if you want to tick it off your list, you've got to stop here. And then finally, we end up on the coast, and it's a wonderful example of spiny desert around here. There's nothing quite like it. It's a really magical place, and you get up at dawn, go for a walk before it gets too hot. It really is a joy. This is another species of baobab now. This is an Adansonia ruprostipa, and then lots of these Didieraceae sort of octopus trees as well. Really incredible habitat. There's a couple of really good birds here as well that we'll make a special effort to find. Now, this is the other ground roller that I mentioned of that endemic family. So the only one of the 5 ground rollers that you find in the dry forest. This is the long-tailed ground roller. And another important bird that we'll look for around here is a sub-desert mosite. Again, that's another endemic family. This is another particularly good bird if you're a tour leader, because its defense mechanism when it's spotted is to freeze motionless on a branch. So you can send your scout ahead, you can find the mosite, the bird freezes, and you can bring your group in to get a wonderful photo. Job done. And that is about as far as you can go on the good old RN7. This is a departures board at Tuliar Airport. So from the end of the road, you need to get on the plane. Now, Air Madagascar is quite a fun airline to travel with. The flights generally go, but they won't go at the time you expect them to go. They'll hopefully go the same day, but we never quite know what's going to happen. But you as a client on our tours do not need to worry about this. We are there to sort it all out. So usually our guides will have a phone number for their contact at Air Madagascar. They'll give them a call, check if it's worth going to the airport or not. We'll get you around in the end, but it's quite good to take as few internal flights as possible. But if you want to get to some really great habitats around the country, then you need to fly. So it's worth doing. And that is where I'm going to leave things. So I've run out of time. So thank you very much. I'll be back after the break, but before then, I'm going to hand over to Paul, if he is there. Hello, Paul.
I am. Thank you very much, Kerrie.
No problem. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Right. I will share my screen. Second. Okay. Yeah. So I do have to apologise for a little technical problem. I'm unable to get full screen for some reason with my slideshow
well,
tonight.
It's looking okay to me now.
Well, I've fiddled around with it for the past 20 minutes and got rid of bars along the top and things to try and make it as big as possible. Not quite full screen, but almost there. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Kerrie. Yeah. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in tonight. As Kerrie said, my name is Paul Stanbury. I work in the Naturetrek office alongside Kerrie. Been with the company now for over 25 years. I look after a lot of destinations scattered around the world, but in particular sub-Saharan Africa and East Africa, in Tanzania. So I'm going to talk tonight about Tanzania, in particular northern Tanzania and the national parks along the close to the border with Kenya. It's only one of the most fabulous places anywhere in the world for wildlife, home to some of the greatest concentrations of mammals on the continent and again probably in the world. So where is Tanzania? So hopefully this is going to work. Ah, great, good, it is working. So yeah, Tanzania is East Africa, south of the equator, across the water actually from Madagascar, where Kerrie took you a little earlier. And we fly from London down to Kenya, and then there's a short hop from Nairobi across to northern Tanzania to Arusha, and where we start our trips. So this is a map from the Naturetrek brochure, just outlining the main wildlife areas of northern Tanzania and the route that we take on our Tanzania Highlights holiday, a trip we've been running for many years. We operate this trip in January, February time, in November as well. As shown here, we fly into Arusha, and then we explore the main wildlife areas of northern Tanzania. Arusha National Park, down into Tarangire National Park, Lake Manyara, up into the Crater Highlands to visit the world famous Ngorongoro crater, and then over to the equally famous Serengeti National Park as well. And this is a 2-week holiday. So we operate this in January, February time, and at that time of year, the wildebeest are down in the southern Serengeti, and also in November as well. Whatever time you get of year you go to the Serengeti, to go to Tanzania, there's always a fabulous amount of diversity of wildlife to enjoy. But for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm just going to take you through some of these national parks and show you some of the wildlife highlights to look out for. So the vehicles we use in Tanzania are great for both wildlife spotting and for the keen photographers amongst you. We take 6 people per vehicle. Everybody gets a window seat. You can see from this photograph here that the windows open on the side. And when you're out in the national parks doing your safaris, they open up the guide will open up the roof so you can stick your head out the top, and great visibility, great for photographs as well. And the trips are made really by the local guides. The guides are really very friendly, very nice people, and they're great naturalists as well. They are superb at spotting the wildlife. They know their birds, they know their mammals, and they really will help to make a holiday a very special and unforgettable experience. And with some of our Tanzania trips, we also send a UK leader out as well. So if you like to be escorted out from the UK, then we will send a UK tour leader out to join these the local staff. Oops, one 2 minutes. Right, so after we fly into Arusha, we have a little look around Arusha National Park, and then we move to Tarangire National Park. And Tarangire is it's a mix of grassland, acacia scrub, wetlands, about 2,600 square kilometres, and is centred along the Tarangire River. And this is a photograph here of the Tarangire River. The landscape is dotted with these amazing, huge baobabs, and it's just a lovely park to explore, full of fantastic wildlife as well. It's particularly good for elephants, herds, especially in the dry season, of up to 300 elephants congregating along the Tarangire River here. I say here, plenty of elephants to see. Elephants actually are relatively common throughout many of the national parks in Tanzania, but Tarangire in particular has some high concentrations. There are giraffes here, Maasai giraffes in Tarangire, and a wonderful variety of bird as well. There's over 550 species of bird occur within the national park. This is a white-headed buffalo weaver. and the beautiful, superb glossy starling. This is a very common bird throughout Tanzania, and one you'll see frequently, probably daily on this trip. And when the sun catches the blue feathering on the back, the iridescence really is quite spectacular. Maybe not quite so attractive is the marabou stork, another common bird you see throughout the country. They serve a very important purpose in the country. They're scavengers, and they'll join the vultures and the hyenas on the kills and help clean up the landscape. Tarangire is probably the place to look for wild dogs. They are difficult to see in Tanzania, but of all the national parks in the north of the country, Tarangire is probably the one place where you do stand a chance of seeing this amazing predator. If you're particularly keen on wild dogs, then you could think about going south to Selous and Ruaha, and those two parks are particularly good for dog sightings. And then after, we have a couple of nights in Tarangire National Park, and we move the short distance to Lake Manyara National Park. And this is a much smaller park, only 330 square kilometers, centered around the lake Manyara itself, a soda lake. We're right on the bottom of the Rift Valley here, right on the edge of the Rift Valley escarpment, which you can see to the right of this photograph, which would go up onto the Ngorongoro highlands. It's a small park, but it's a really lovely little park to visit, home again to some really nice wildlife, some nice mammals and birds. The bird life, again, very prolific, similar number of species to Tarangire, about 500 and 550 or so. Southern ground hornbill here is quite an easy bird to see, along with a variety of other smaller hornbills as well. Some interesting mammals. This is the little Kirk's dik-dik, one of the smallest antelopes in Tanzania, and again, quite commonly seen both here and in Tarangire. There are lions in Manyara National Park, and they are quite special lions because they quite often climb up into trees and spend the heat of the day relaxing up in trees. To actually see this in reality is quite difficult, but you may strike lucky and you may see the famous tree climbing lions of Lake Manyara National Park. And then after a night, in fact, we spend our night on the top of the escarpment overlooking the Rift Valley. The lodges here, spectacular view out over the Rift Valley. But after a night there, we head up into the Ngorongoro Highlands, up into the Crater Highlands, and pass into the famous Ngorongoro Conservation Area. And we're heading up, of course, to one of the most famous sites anywhere in Africa, the very famous Ngorongoro crater itself, often touted as the eighth wonder of the world. And this is a collapsed volcanic caldera that collapsed about 3 million years ago. It's up to 600 meters deep, 20 kilometers across, and it protects one of the world's great it's one of the world's great wildlife havens. And we stay in a very nice lodge here as well. There's the Sopa Lodge, which is perched right on the top of the crater rim. You can have a dip in the pool and have this amazing view in front of you. It's only about 10 minutes from the descent road as well. That takes you from the crater rim down onto the crater floor. And you can see from this photo, not only the swimming pool, but behind the swimming pool, you've got the quite thick forest, and the edge of the crater is covered in thick forest, home to some quite interesting birds and wildlife. The beautiful golden-winged sunbird lives up in this area, an absolutely gorgeous bird that lives up on the top in the cooler forest that edge the crater. When you wake up in the morning, it's quite chilly up in the Ngorongoro crater rim. It's worth having a jacket with you before you descend onto the crater floor, where it's that little bit warmer. Equally attractive scarlet-chested sunbird, as well as another species to look out for. And we'll take you down, of course, onto the crater floor to enjoy the spectacle of the wildlife here. And so there's permanent water within the Ngorongoro, so the animals are resident here. There's maybe up to it's very large herds of buffalo, and here you can see the big five as well. So buffalo, elephant, leopard, lion, and rhino too. There are elephants down on the crater here. We're looking out, of course, sat on the crater floor, looking out towards the escarpment behind. The crater opens at 6:30 in the morning, so we'll try and get our groups down. We will get our groups down very early in the morning, and then you take a packed breakfast, have a packed lunch with you, so you can spend the whole day exploring the crater floor. I mentioned the big five. Well, this is a great place to look for black rhino. Sadly, a much persecuted species in Africa in general, but there's still a very healthy population living on the crater floor. In the centre of the Ngorongoro crater is the wonderful Lake Magadi. This is a soda lake, and at certain times of the year, it's full of lesser flamingos. And unlike Lake Manyara, which you can't actually get very close to, Lake Magadi you can drive quite close to, so you can enjoy the spectacle of the flamingos, as well as looking at the wading birds, black-winged stilt, a variety of migrant waders, all feeding along the very edge of the lakeshore. And then take lots of birds to enjoy in the Ngorongoro, as well as lots of mammals as well. Grey-crowned cranes are common here. Beautiful bird with this wonderful bright punkish hairstyle. The Kerrie bustard, one of the world's heaviest flying birds. You'll see them displaying out on the crater floor, and this one here has two chicks down by its feet. The beautiful rosy-throated longclaw, a type of very attractive pipit that's commonly seen down on the crater floor. And during the time of our visits, February, March time, there are a lot of migrant birds use the crater as a stopover on their way north up into Europe. Now, I was there a few years ago. It was absolutely full of barn swallows, of owl swallow, loads and loads of swifts, wonderful variety of yellow wagtails, and really interesting plethora of birds heading north up towards Europe and Asia to breed. And European rollers as well, lots of European rollers on their way north up into Europe. Of course, as well as the birds, plenty of wherever there's plenty of game, you'll find the predators. Lions are particularly abundant down in Ngorongoro crater. Now, I put this particular photo in not to scare you away from going to Tanzania, but to say that although the crater can get crowded at times, we're very good at avoiding the crowds on Naturetrek tours. And the way to do that is just to get down to the crater floor early. Most people have a leisurely breakfast. They get down on the crater floor about 9, 10 o'clock, hang around until early afternoon, and then go. So if you're there in those first couple of hours of daylight and the last couple of hours of daylight, you get the crater. It's much quieter, and you can avoid the crowds. As you might guess, these particular crowds were after a group of lions. You can see the tail of a lion just sticking out here from behind that jeep. So we go down first thing in the morning, and the light is better first thing in the morning for photography, and the animals are active as well by 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. Most of the lions are typically laying down and will sleep for the rest of the day. But if you're down there at first light, then the animals are active and out and hunting, and the birds are more active as well. The rufous-naped lark here in full song is one of the familiar sounds of the crater first thing in the morning. Then from the crater, we head back up into the highlands and drop down into the grassy plains of the Ngorongoro conservation area and the world famous Serengeti. So we time our trips for say February, March time, when the migration does a clockwise circular route around the Serengeti, moving down into the short grass plains around Ndutu in December to May time, and then gradually making their way further north up towards Kenya for October, November time. So the animals, the wildebeest, so there's 1.2 million wildebeest migrate annually around the Serengeti, and they follow the rains. So in November, December time, the short rains have watered the short grass plains down in the southern Serengeti and create this very rich new growth of grass, and attract down the vast herds. And you'll get to see this spectacle of a sea of wildebeest stretching to the horizon. So over 1.2 million animals come down here, and they're joined by over 250,000 zebra, 500,000 gazelle. So it really is a spectacular sight and sound. We split our time in Serengeti between a couple of nights in the centre of the park and 2 nights down in the south around the Ndutu area, staying in one of the lovely little temporary tented camps that are set up down here. Very nice beds. They've got their own ensuite bush loos and showers. And we'll be right in the heart of the action and go out and looking for the Grant's gazelle, such as this, and their smaller cousin, the Thompson's gazelle as well. And wherever you've got such a huge abundance of game, of course, the predators will follow. And there's thought to be over 2,000 lions in the Serengeti region. And this is a great place for cheetah as well. Cheetah like the wide open grassy plains, and they prey on the gazelles. And if you're lucky, cheetah might decide to use your vehicle as a lookout post. They like to get a bit of elevation where they can scan for not only for prey, but look for larger predators as well. And on this particular occasion, this mother with 2 large cubs decided they'd jump up on top of our safari vehicle and use it as a lookout. And the leopard as well is the last of those 3 big cats that we hope to see during our time in Tanzania. But one animal our groups have been particularly lucky to see over the years is serval, and we've probably seen more serval on our Tanzania tours than any of all of our other safaris put together. And wherever you've got the predators and you've got the game and you've got the prey, you've got the scavengers as well. And spotted hyenas are common within the park. Lots of, still fortunately, quite a few vultures down here. A family in general has been very heavily persecuted around the world. There's a large leopard-faced vulture here. Some other interesting animals to look for. If you go out in the evening, you've got a good chance of seeing the wonderful bat-eared fox, and plenty of birds as well. Birds all over the place. Secretary birds, the beautiful white-throated bee-eater, lots of lilac-breasted rollers all over the place as well. Real kaleidoscope of different birds to enjoy. And although our main tours don't visit this particular spot, we can just put a couple of slides in at the end just to illustrate some extensions that we can offer. We can take you to Lake Natron in northern, right up near the Kenyan border, right down in the Rift Valley and overlooked by the active volcano of Oldo Lengai. Lake Natron has one of the main breeding site for lesser flamingos in the whole of southern Africa. And if you want to have a relax as well after your Tanzanian safari, we can take you out to Zanzibar Island, where you can have a few days on a lovely sandy palm fringe beach to relax and soak up the sun before heading back to the UK. So I'll end here on sunset shot over the over Tanzania. If any questions at all, please do let me know. And I think it's time now for a short break, and then I think Kerrie's going to continue after the break. So I shall stop sharing my screen, and thank you very much for listening, and say we'll be back in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Go. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you are well rested and ready for the next instalment. Next up, we have Kerrie, who'll be talking about the Seychelles. So over to you shortly, Kerrie. But can I also just encourage people to just give us all your questions and answers, because we will be happy to answer those at the end of the presentation. So keep those coming. We'd love to hear from you. And I'll hand over to Kerrie now.
Thanks very much, Georgie. So you've all got me again. I'm just covering up my little button. Here we go. Right, I'm set. So let's go again. So from one very large Indian Ocean island, we are now going to whiz over the ocean to 115 much smaller Indian Ocean islands, because it's 115 islands that make up the Seychelles. So together they have a collective landmass of just 455 square kilometres, but they are scattered over 1.3 million square kilometres of Indian Ocean. Seychelles, of course, well known for its beautiful beaches, its rich underwater life, but it also boasts a captivating land flora and fauna. So there's more than 110 endemic species of plant, 75 endemic animal species, and just under half of the Seychelles' total area of land is given over to national parks and reserves. And species conservation is a really high priority here. There's numerous examples of successful reintroduction programs that we'll see, and I'll mention a few this evening. And there's plenty of interested bird watchers, numerous rare endemics that we can find. But really this tour also appeals to people that want 2 lovely weeks of good weather, lovely beaches and scenery, great all-round wildlife watching, some lovely snorkeling, plenty of delicious food. It's a real all-rounder, fairly gentle pace as Naturetrek trips go. There's no pressing urge to get up at the crack of dawn and we get back to our hotels in the late afternoon normally. It's not a dawn till dusk style tour. It is really very appealing for many reasons. And I had the unfortunate task of accompanying our group there a few years ago. So let me tell you more about it. I will kick off, I'll get my pointer back again, just getting bearings as usual. So here we were in Madagascar earlier, and now we're heading up here to the Seychelles, so smack in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And of these 115 islands, geologically, they have 2 distinct origins. So the inner islands, which are where the word Seychelles appears in this map and are shown in this inset map here, the inner islands are continental granitic remnants, whereas the outer islands, which some of them, some 1,000 kilometres afield, here-ish, they're coral atolls. So we fly to and from Mahe, which is the biggest of those inner islands, the granitic islands, and this is where we start and finish our tour. We spend 4 nights on Mahe, so we have 2 days at the start of the trip and 2 days at the end. We also spend 5 nights on Pralam, which is this island here. And from there, we visit lots of these other little islands that are scattered around it, many of which are uninhabited. And we also spend 3 nights on Bird Island, which is up here a bit further north. So let's start in Mahe. It is beautiful. And to me, if I was shipwrecked by pirates in the Indian Ocean and washed up onto a beach somewhere, this is where I'd find myself. It's got these beautiful white sand beaches surrounding a densely vegetated, rugged, mountainous interior. It's fab. So we spend 4 days here, as I say. It's plenty of time to explore the whole island. We'll do some easy birding, some gentle walks. We take an excursion to the Sentan Marine National Park on a glass-bottom boat, do some snorkeling. Again, interspersed with some excellent food, lots of Creole fish curries. In terms of accommodation, we stay in Beauvallon in the north of Mahe. As I know, it's very far and it's easy to explore the whole area, but it's a nice place to stay. The hotel we use is very comfortable. It's not a 5-star honeymooning destination like you might think of the Seychelles, it would be a waste of everyone's money because we spend our days out and about exploring. But it's a very comfortable place to put your head down at night, and it's got some really good food and beautiful beach. So this is the beach outside the hotel. So if you want to start and end your day with a swim in the warm Indian Ocean, then you can go nuts. And then during our 2 weeks in the Seychelles, we'll be enjoying all aspects of wildlife, and we'll be looking for many of the Seychelles Endemics, some of which shown here. So there's some interesting plants, many birds, reptiles, of course, the very important Cebu beer as well. So in terms of some of those endemic birds, well, this is a handsome Seychelles blue pigeon. They're pretty common. We'll be seeing them quite a lot as we adventure around. And then this little chap is a zebra dove, also known as a barred ground dove. Again, they're really common, so we'll see plenty of them as we go. The Seychelles turtle dove is another endemic. You also find Madagascar turtle doves in Seychelles and various hybrids of the two. But there are places where we know we're looking at an authentic Seychelles turtle dove. So if you want it on your endemic stick list, then we know how to find it. My favourite of all the endemic plants, could be second favourite, tricky. Maybe joint favourite is this Nepenthes Seychelles picture plant. Useful, growing all over these bushes. So we'll go a nice gentle walk and we'll find this as we go along. It's called a Nepenthes pervillii. So it's the only picture plant in the Seychelles, and it isn't endemic. We'll also spend some time around Victoria, the capital, and we'll be looking for lots of waders around here. So lots of egrets and herons, great sandplovers, Pteric sandpiper, Pacific golden plover, lots of lovely things to find. But what we're really looking for here is crab plover. So they tend to return to Marhay somewhere around early to mid-September. And Naturetrek tours go to Seychelles somewhere around early to mid-September. It's like we planned it. So hopefully when we get there, our first 2 days in Marhay will coincide with being able to find all these beautiful, delicate plovers. But should the stars not quite align at the beginning of the tour, we have our 2 days back on Marhay at the end. So if they're not there by the start, they really should be there by the end. So we've got a really good chance of finding them as we go about our days. So from Marhay, we transfer over to Praslin. So as I said, we spend 5 nights here, and we tend to take the boat in one direction to get there, and then we fly back the other way. The boat trip's quite nice. It's not too long, pretty stable. So it's just quite a fun thing to do. Might see something exciting as we go past. And then we tend to fly back because then we go straight onto Bird Island. So logistically, it works quite well. And on Praslin, we're staying in this really nice family-run, pretty small hotel. Sometimes we'll be the only guests as we've taken over all the rooms. And it's got a good restaurant, nice pool, as you can see. This is important because this is the site for the Seychelles black parrot flyover. There's also lots of Seychelles swiftlets that will come, and in fact, some wonderful fruit bats that will fly over the hillsides here. But in particular, it's good to get yourself back from a lovely day's excursion, get changed, get your cosy on, slip into the pool, so hang around here somewhere. And up in these trees, there's often the Seychelles black parrots, so you can listen out for them and then get treated to a flyover at about 4:30 in the afternoon. So this Seychelles black parrot is one of 4 species in the Corycopsis genus. The others being the greater and lesser vaza parrots that you would find in Madagascar, and then the comorous black parrot. So this is the Seychelles black parrot. So in and around the pool area, we'll also see lots of these little Seychelles sunbirds. It's another endemic for you. And plenty of Madagascar foodies as well. In fact, I saw a lot more Madagascar foodies in Seychelles than I've ever seen in Madagascar. So lots of bright red flashes as you head around. But our reason for being on Praslin is primarily to be able to visit lots of the other islands in this area. So I'll just mention at this point that we do lots of boat trips. Really nice, great way of exploring. You do have to have a degree of mobility. So I've chosen quite an overcast day as well, actually, to take this photo. A word on the weather, in fact, as we're pausing here. Seychelles weather used to be super predictable. Depending on which way the trade winds are going, you knew what would be happening. But as has happened across most of the world now, weather is not predictable anymore. It's always going to be pretty lovely, lots of blue skies and sunshine, but it does get overcast sometimes, and there's the odd downpour as we had on this particular boat trip. But back to the boat trips. So yeah, a degree of mobility is useful, obviously, because you do need to be able to get in and out of the boats. On some of the uninhabited islands, then you'll be doing wet landing. So like here, you'd be wading out to the boat and climbing in aboard, and then the same on the reverse. There's always a guide, a tour leader, other people around to help, you know, a stable hand to get you in, but you do need to be able to get yourself in and out of these boats. And it's obviously very beautiful. So this is on Ladi, one of the first islands that we'll visit, good sized little island. We head over there on the boat and we take this, what one of our guests termed the balcony on wheels, over to the Black Paradise Flycatcher Reserve. So this is a lovely female with its rufous back and tail feathers. And then we'll also be looking for this beautiful male with its long black tail streamers and that little bit of eyeliner under its eyes. Feels like a real privilege to be wandering around a reserve and finding these beautiful birds one morning. And as we go around to these little islands, we'll start seeing our first Aldabra giant tortoises. So by the mid-1800s, I think, yeah, mid-1800s, they were basically extinct on all the inner granitic islands due to sailors eating them. So that then became extinct. However, there's a very large population of some 100,000 giant tortoises on the incredibly remote Aldabra Atoll. So this is some 1,000 kilometers from where we're based at the moment on this tour. And in the 1800s, they were never reached by sailors. So in more recent times, some of these tortoises have been translocated to various uninhabited islands on the inner islands, and new wild populations have become established. So we should start seeing some of them. And as I said, again, the main reason visiting numerous islands is that they all have a different endemic bird that we're going to hope to catch up with. So this is a Seychelles Warbler, endemic, and this was taken on the little island of Kuzan, where our little population survives. Back in 1988, the only population of Seychelles Warblers was found on Kuzan, but thanks to efforts from BirdLife International, there are now populations established on 3 different little islands. And you can see, obviously, they've got the rings here, so they're being carefully monitored to see how those populations are doing. Similarly, the Seychelles magpie robin is another example of a really successful reintroduction program. Again, this little bird was seen on Kuzan, one of the islands that we'll visit. So for the Seychelles magpie robin, there had been confirmed records on numerous islands in the 1800s and in the early part of the 20th century. But from there on, there was a drastic population decline. So that was caused by habitat destruction, clearance for agricultural land, as well as the introduction of alien predators, in particular rats and cats. So by 1990, the total population of Seychelles magpie robins was down to about 20 individuals total. So it was classified as critically endangered, and a recovery program was initiated by BirdLife International, funded by the RSPB. So they did predator eradication, supplementary feeding, they provided nest boxes, they restored habitat, they banned certain pesticides, and in addition, small numbers of birds were translocated to uninhabited islands. And that was after extremely careful predator eradication to establish new breeding populations. And again, this is another really successful reintroduction program. So what you tend to see now is particularly on Kuzan is you'll see your Aldabra giant tortoise going along, dragging its belly, and then the little Seychelles magpie robins hop along behind, so that the tortoise is exposed to all of the bare earth, and that allows them to feed as they hop along behind. Very nice to watch. I haven't got a photo actually, but we happened to visit Sister Island, Gonser, sister in English, on the trip that I co-led a few years ago, and we happened to coordinate our visit with the release of 47 endemic Seychelles white eyes. So that was another reintroduction program. We met the chap that had been masterminding it over the last few years, and it was incredible the amount of work that had gone into it, and really making sure that it was rat-free. It was so important. He said if there's only one rat on the island at the point that you release those white eyes, then they've got no chance. So anyway, they'd been brought over from 2 different islands, from Conception and North Island, just previously, and they'd been in their aviary sort of cages for a few days adjusting, and then the morning we got there they'd just been released, so we had a lovely walk and we're listening to all these Seychelles white eyes twitching around. It was really quite magical. So as we're wandering around these little islands, we'll be passing lots of fluffy white-tailed tropic bird chicks. They're totally unbothered by your presence. They've got no predators there now, so you can literally walk past, I would say meters, but not even meters, centimeters off the path. There'll be little fluffy chicks just sat there looking cute at you, asking for you to take a photograph of them. And then besides the birds, there's loads to see really. So this is a Seychelles skink. We'll find lots of those. This is a day gecko, and most uninhabited, or most islands, sorry, in the Seychelles seem to have a day gecko named after them. So this is I'm not sure which, I think it's a Ladigue day gecko. I've forgotten, I'll be honest. There's a Mahe day gecko, there's a Pralan day gecko, there's all these different day geckos. And whilst we're on Pralan, we'll spend a day there on the island itself, and we'll visit the Bellied Lemur, which is home to 6 endemic palms, including the mighty Coco de Mer, which are these huge trees here. And they have the world's largest nut and the world's largest seed, which looks rather like a lady's bottom. These are amazing. They were completely enshrouded in mystery for years because they would just appear on distant shores and no one could work out where they came from, because they would try and grow something out of them and nothing would ever grow. And what had happened is that these nuts are seriously heavy, so they'd fall into the sea and they'd sink. But once the internal parts of the nut start to decay, they release gases, making them float. So eventually they'll wash up on a distant shore, for example, in the Maldives, many hundreds, thousands of kilometers away. But by this point, the nut is infertile, so it won't grow. So they could never work out where they came from. At the same time, some sailors would see them falling upwards from the sea when those gases were making them float. So the very sensible conclusion was they must be growing on underwater trees, hence the name Coco de Mer of the sea. So after a lovely morning exploring the Bellied Lemur, it's worth stopping on a beautiful beach, go for a swim, go for a snorkel. There's lots of lovely snorkeling opportunities on this tour. There's obviously nothing's compulsory. You don't have to snorkel, you don't have to be a swimmer or a snorkeler at all. But if you are, then there are lots of lovely opportunities. Some of them just going in from the beach like we would here. Sometimes going off the boats. If we're doing a day trip out on a boat, we might find a nice reef to stop in, and sometimes just popping a snorkel on after lunch, going for a little dip. And then from Pralan, we head north once again, and we go to the marvellous Bird Island for the grand finale. Well, actually, we carry on to Mahe, but for most, it is the highlight of the tour. So we stay here for 3 nights. And it is private island, private reserve, and private lodge, all rolled into one, and absolutely fantastic for birders. It is small. These are the huts. This is the runway, the airstrip. We'll come back to the Sooty Tern Reserve shortly. Lots of beach. This is the welcoming committee. Tortoise just waiting to meet you. This island is also home to Esmeralda, who's the oldest and heaviest tortoise known to be alive today. Esmeralda is a he. He was thought to be a she for a long time, but he is a he. So lovely Esmeralda. Accommodation is nice. It's pretty simple. It's very eco-friendly, so it's not air-conned. It's all designed to promote airflow. It's really comfortable, and all of it is just a stone's throw from marvelous beaches like this. Again, there's delightful snorkeling here. This is my favourite snorkeling spot. You just go into the sea from here and be seeing big humphead parrotfish, octopus, lots of damselfish, butterfly fish, wrasse, all sorts. Pretty good chance of turtles. We go slightly ahead of the nesting season, but you might well see them swimming around, and we saw a few green turtles whilst we were out snorkeling here. Quite often you'll have a giant tortoise just wandering past your lodge as you go about your business there. If you return from snorkeling and start to wash off your gear at the back of your hut, your lodge, sometimes the tortoise will come along for a drink. And the birding is super easy here, so you can just be sat on your deck and hear a greater and lesser noddies just keeping you company. I actually started keeping a bird list of birds that were inside my lodge, not just on my veranda, but actually inside my lodge, and that got quite extensive in the end. They're really friendly. They're not worried about you at all. You can just wander past. You get really lovely close photo opportunities. So this obviously beautiful fairy tern, lots of them around. And we just spend the day, we go for an early morning bird walk, and we'll probably do an evening one as well. We'll snorkel in the heat of the day. You can go around on your own devices because it's so small. You can wander around the airstrip. It's just really straightforward, just a really civilized place to stay for a few days. The highlight though is got to be the sooty tern colony. So from May to October, there are 1.5 million terns here, about 700,000 pairs. In the trees around, we'll also find greater dresser frigate birds, boobies roosting here. So there's lots to see, but the sooty terns have got to be the highlight. And you can see all here feeding their chicks. Again, we've timed our trip here so that we're here towards the end, but there's still a lot of terns to look at. So we'll go here a few times during our stay on Bird Island, go in the morning, go in the evening, and just marvel at this amazing spectacle of this colony of sooty terns. And that's where we have to finish. So probably one of my favourite ever departure lounges was just standing here in the shade of the trees, watching some noddies and some terns and some frigate birds overhead. It's waited for our little plane to arrive and whisk us back to Mahe for a few more days before flying home. And that's where I'm going to finish. So I think Neil is up next. So hopefully he is there, ready and raring to go. I'll be around for any questions at the end. Thank you very much for listening. Over to Neil. Maybe not. Hello, Neil. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. There you are.
Yeah. Can you see me though?
I can see you can hear you, and it looks like you're about to share your screen, or you've shared your screen.
Yeah, okay.
You're away.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Kerrie. And fantastic. You're clearly into your islands. So I'm very envious of the Seychelles and of Madagascar as well, but there you are. Anyway, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to talk about Uganda. Which is the marvelous Uganda Mammals and Mountains tour that Naturetrek have been doing for a good number of years now. And the beauty of Uganda is that the temperatures out there are pretty much the same throughout the whole year. So you're talking about sort of mid-20s centigrade, and the wildlife pretty much remains the same throughout the whole year. So the advantages going to Uganda, possibly say September, October. If you go again in January, February, much of the wildlife is fairly similar. The advantage of going in the winter, of course, is you have the opportunity perhaps of seeing some western or eastern Palearctic migrants that might be wintering there bird-wise, but otherwise the mammals are very, very much there all the time. So here is a map of pretty much what you see on the Naturetrek site associated with the location. So we fly into Entebbe, which you can hopefully see with my cursor here. And pretty much we then go about a circular tour around the bottom end of the country. We're looking at places like Entebbe as our base to start off with, get ourselves refreshed and sorted out. We're right on the shores of Lake Victoria, which of course we share with some of the other countries. And we're very close to a place called Mabamba Swamp, which is a very interesting place. Then we move along this area here into Lake Maburo National Park, which is a very pleasant area, one of my favorites. And then into the amazing but windy impenetrable forest area, looking for, of course, one of the highlights of the tour, which is the mountain gorillas. We then move up into this area here, which is the Queen Elizabeth National Park, and the amazing Kazinga Channel. And then pretty much the tour finishes around Kibale, which is the area just to the north. And then we whiz around back to Entebbe. So I'm just going to start us off. We fly in normally by way of Kenyan Airlines, so sometimes via Nairobi. We stop at Entebbe, and pretty much we get straight into some really good birds. So there's botanical gardens at Entebbe, and this tends to be where we go on for the first sort of half day or so to have a look round. And straight away, you're into exotic stuff like this Ross's Turco. But people who are familiar with some of the birds of Africa will be familiar with broad-billed roller. The roller family in Africa is always something quite amazing. And one of the specialities of this particular part of Africa is the black and white cast hornbill. So the hornbills are a spectacular family, and this is just an example. So this is a little taster, and actually, even though it's a botanical garden, there's actually quite a host of primates here as well, all sorts of different bits and pieces. So it's a good starter for 10. But of course, when we're on the shores of Lake Victoria, it's a very, very wildlife-rich area. And as a consequence, you can get nice and close to lots of water birds. And of course, the cattle egret is a bird that was now sort of almost taking over the world, it seems, and is very common in this part of Africa. Of course, a very typical African bird is the hammerkop. And the hammerkop is a fabulous thing that you can see over many different parts of Africa, but you get really good views. And you can probably anticipate some of the photographic opportunities are pretty special here as well. Paul mentioned earlier on about the marabou storks. Beauty is in the beholder, really. And as far as I'm concerned, the old marabou stork has a certain amount of poise and beauty about it, although its habits might not be fantastic. But here you can get very close and personal with the somewhat grotesque beak and head of a marabou stork. And absolutely, why not? And whilst you're on the shores of Lake Victoria, personally, I've never seen so many pied kingfishers. Normally, when you go to sort of places like Africa, you can see 2 or 3, maybe 4 pied kingfishers. Here, they're flying around in flocks, absolutely in their droves. They do allow a nice close approach, so you can get a nice view of a very special bird, of a very special group of birds, in my opinion. Anyway, we have to move on. So we're going up to Mabamba Swamp, and this is to see a rather special bird. And we've got some local guides to take us out and show us this special bird, which of course is the shoebill stork, which is a bit of a one-off bird. And really, the only place you'll really like to see it in the world really is by going to the marshes and swamps associated with this area in Uganda. So just like everywhere else in Africa, you'll find that the helpers and guides are really nice people, very easygoing, very helpful. And what we do is go out on small boats such as this, and then we're going out onto the swamp looking for some water birds. And on our way out there, we'll hopefully anticipate things like the long-toed lapwing, which is a rather attractive bird. And an example of a Western Palearctic migrant would be perhaps a wood sandpiper walking around on the huge lilies. And the amazing African jacana with his absolutely huge feet splashing around. So you get nice and close to a lot of the water birds that are very close to some of the boats as you pass by. But of course, the one that everybody wants to see is this amazing shoebill stork, which is this prehistoric looking creature that lives in this area, which is associated really with the papyrus reed beds. So you don't really see them away from that sort of habitat. And this bird basically feeds on just one thing, which is the lungfish that lives in the waters here. So it grabs that lungfish with that huge bill of its own and grabs hold of it and just swallows it, and does it very, very quickly indeed. It is a prehistoric creature in as much that it's a threatened species in as much it has a very poor breeding output. So it might lay 2 eggs and it might hatch 2 young, but in reality, only one of those young will actually survive. But it was a privilege to see the shoebill stork, and if you like, a bit of a bonus really when you bear in mind that the trip is all about the mammals and mountains. Saddlebill stork is another, I think, just as impressive creature. Look at the colours on the plumage there. That amazing beak. A bit of a close-up there just to really appreciate that. So yeah, you've seen 3 good storks already. A bit like Paul was mentioning earlier on, I think it's hard to beat a Toyota Land Cruiser as your mode of transport. And we do a lot of journeying around. So that circular tour around the southern end of Uganda may not look very far, but it's some quite long journeys. So we need to ensure that we're comfortable, and also we have a good platform for seeing some of the wildlife that's there. So quite typically, the Toyota Land Cruisers are the typical workhorses of Africa and in many parts of the world, and it's what we take advantage of. So we move on to the next little national reserve called Lake Maburo, which is a particular favourite of mine. It's a sort of a bushy area with lots of scrub and acacia, and then these remarkable longhorn cattle, which are obviously beasts looked after by the locals. But how on earth a cow or a bull can actually hold its head up with the size of those horns is beyond me, but there you are. But we're straight into the wildlife here, and it's a sort of grassland, can be fairly arid, this area here. There is big game, but the beauty of this place is that there are no big predators. So you can actually get out and walk about, which I think is quite something in Africa. So there's no lions or leopards to be too concerned about. Lappet-faced vulture, this one's in flight. I think Paul's was on the ground earlier on. And a view from in the vehicle of a Burchell zebra, which we can get to quite nice and close as well, which is really good. And with other sort of typical wildlife of this area, there's a Defasa waterbuck. So if you looked at a book of African mammals about 30, 40 years ago, it just used to say giraffe and waterbuck and what have you. Of course, since then, people have done a lot more work, and now you've got a lot of these species and split into separate species in their own right. A warthog is definitely one of my favorites, and this particular individual it must have been habituated, because I was kneeling down right next to it and it really didn't care. And there's a few stories in that face, I think. So anything to get close to a waterbuck is to warthog is always pretty impressive. So lovely creature. Of course, the indomitable buffalo, pretty much quite common in this area, with a yellow-billed oxpecker on its back. And obviously they like wallowing in sort of muddy areas. And although it's a fairly dry area, there are quite a few water holes at Tumaburo, and this is where obviously we look for a lot of the wildlife. Another one of my favorite African mammals. I just think they look so beautiful and well marked and lovely featured, lovely big eyes, big black eyelashes, is the impala, with that impressive horns, and it's two males locked together in a bit of a scuffle there for us to enjoy close to hand. Another one I think is an underrated animal is the topee, and there are lots of variants of this animal in Africa called different things in different parts, but the one here is called the topee, with this sort of burnished brass coat, which makes it very special. So you can see we do get very close to these animals. They're really not bothered. The lack of predators probably makes them a little bit more approachable. And although most of it is by vehicle, you can actually walk out to quite a lot of these animals. Whilst we're at this site, there's an opportunity going out onto a small boat, onto the freshwater area there, and getting up close and personal with some of the wildlife, including obviously the spectacular African fish eagle, more typical birds, very common, but nevertheless one still wonderful, the yellow-billed kite. And I know that if you go to Africa, you almost expect to see malachite kingfishers, but there's something very special about a bird that has those colours on it, and it's such a diminutive little kingfisher. Always a pleasure to get really nice and close. Some birders who might go on the tour might want to particularly see a finfoot, an African finfoot. Sorry about all the foliage in front. It just decided it didn't like me very much and was hiding away. So unlike most of the wildlife, the African finfoots do tend to be quite secretive and furtive. And an opportunity whilst you're actually cruising alongside the acacias, waterborne acacias, to see Western Palearctic migrants, which in this case is a squacco heron. The general sort of area, and just general species, long-crested eagle is a very typical raptor. So you do see a lot of medium-sized and large raptors in this part of Africa, and most of them are really nice and close. That was just sitting on a branch above one of our safari vehicles one day. And we do have an opportunity at this site to actually sit next to waterholes and just see what happens in front, which I always think is very exciting. And you might have a job to try and work out what's going on here, but basically you've got a wattle plover that's mobbing a python that's sort of coming from us towards it. And I kept thinking that it was getting too close, and eventually this python was going to have it. But the python completely ignored the plover's attitude and just simply slithered off and went off into the water as if there was nothing going on at all. But the beauty of Africa, of course, in Eastern Africa is no different, is that you have an opportunity to sit and watching things like this just going off in front of you. A very, very rude Rothschild's giraffe. And again, a few years ago, I think every giraffe was just called giraffe, whereas these days now we know there's actually several species of giraffe that inhabit the continent. Moving on from this general areas, we're starting sort of move up into some upland areas, and which is getting quite exciting. For many people, we're looking at seeing sort of the high point of the tour, which of course is to go into the windy, impenetrable forest. And what this thing envisages is actually going into a very humid, hot area to try and see the mountain gorilla. And it has to be said that the there is a degree of fitness and stamina required for this part of the tour because it is extremely humid and it is sometimes hard work working in the forest. There are numerous family groups of mountain gorillas living in the forest. There's a very strict code and briefing associated before you go in. The group size is limited. You have a tracker that works with you. You have a couple of guides working with you as well, and you pretty much do as you're told. In general, it can take between 3 to 6 hours to actually find a particular family group of gorillas. They are visited every day to ensure that they remain habituated either by the trackers and or eco-tourists. And once you find your gorillas, you're only allowed to stay there for 1 hour. You also pay the privilege. I think at the moment it's something like $700 US, the privilege for going in. Because there's a population in Rwanda and a population in Uganda, then those prices keep changing as one country tries to outdo another. I have to say though, in my day it was $500 and I wasn't too sure I wanted to pay that amount of money, but once you're in there, it really is something. And this is a sort of the sort of view you might get. So we've just come across a family. People are avidly sort of taking photographs, not sure whether or not we could get any closer. And we're told not to approach the gorillas, not to look them in the eye, not to do anything that might upset them. But no one tells a gorilla this, that often actually might walk towards you. And the young ones in particular are quite curious and might come and have a look at you. The adults completely blank you. But I had the wonderful privilege of sitting right next to Silverback for about an hour. And he walked up to me and sat down and he made various noises, which I won't go into, but they weren't particularly pleasant. He's got a big bum, he's got a big tum, he's got a huge head. And I actually saw him sort of sitting there in a fairly sort of laid back mode, but I also saw him go into the aggressive mode as well when another gorilla approached too close. So absolutely amazing beast. And for some people, a must-see creature. And of all the apes, probably the one I wanted to see most of all. Anyway, we have to move on from there because the tour demanded us to go further around to the Queen Elizabeth National Park and also to particularly get to the Kazinga Channel, which is the area that connects two lakes. And here there's a big buildup of birds and animals. And again, we're finding more Western Paleatic birds with white-winged terns, or what used to be called white-winged black terns. And you can get pretty close to these birds, get some really nice images of them. Pink-backed pelican is another typical bird of this sort of area. We also get the Eurasian white pelicans as well. But of course, the mammals, they love the water. And so we want to see the mammals, don't we? And it's very hard when you're a bird going to Africa because the mammals tend to dominate, in my opinion. And even as a bird, you tend to push the birds to one side because the mammals just take over. I would like to think there's probably 3 generations of elephant there with a little this one underneath, and provide some fantastic opportunities. And who can not want to watch a herd of elephants? Here's the old buffalo again. And of course, in the background, you might be able to see some African skimmers and lots of terns. And we actually go on a boat trip around the Kazinga Channel and you have an opportunity to get very close to the animals and the birds. The actual part of the main part of the Queen Elizabeth National Park is a fairly arid grassland prairie area with some savanna and bushes. It's not as rich as if you're used to going to places like Tanzania, Kenya, and Botswana. It's not as wildlife rich as those. So it does take, some of the animals do take a bit of finding. This is one of the endemics or near endemics, this associated part of the Rift Valley, which is Uganda cob. And you see there's some similarity with the impala, but the impala doesn't actually occur here. So this is where the cob takes over. But I think it probably fits into the same niche. In this general area, there are lots of sort of general purpose birds we can see over large parts of Uganda and Africa, such as speckled pigeon. Got an opportunity if you're into your other beasts. The agamas are really sort of the most common lizards you come across. I'm afraid I don't know which species this was. And one of the local specialities to try and see when it comes to the weavers is the golden back weaver, which is a rather special creature. Afraid I wasn't able to actually definitely identify this butterfly to a species, but I just like the photograph. And whilst you're actually in the national park, we're riding around in the 4x4 Land Cruisers, A lot of the birds are coming nice and close to us, including this yellow-billed kite again. And you start seeing some of the generalist things like African pie wagtail and plain bat pipit as just typical passerines to try and see. There are lions here, and there are hyenas, and there are leopards as well. They're probably not as easy to see as they would be in places like Botswana, Tanzania, that's been covered elsewhere. But this is the accommodation you would stay at when you're exploring the Queen Elizabeth National Park, all rather comfortable, and it overlooks the Kazinga Channel, so you can actually look down and see the multitude of wildlife down below you, even if you don't want to get any closer. Pretty comfortable on the inside, but typical of Africa, often need to need in mosquito nets. Not luxurious, but very comfortable. The food is excellent, so you have a broad range of diets, and as I understand it, when I was there, we had quite a few vegetarians, a couple of vegans on our trip, and they were catered for admirably. We don't eat hippos, but that little picture there was just to remind me to talk about food, because really there's not really an issue with devouring most aspects of food out there, assuming you know what you want to eat. It's not all big stuff as well, so there's some small diminutive sort of little creatures as well. Dwarf Mongoose are rather quaint little creatures that move around in small little groups, and often quite tame. Just sometimes just as nice as looking as the bigger animals as well. And a close view of a bateleur, which you normally just see them sort of cruising around overhead, rocking from side to side. You don't often get a good view of one actually in a tree. I think this was a young bird that hasn't quite come into full plumage as yet. Black-headed herons out here tend to be sort of savanna herons. So we think of herons as water birds, but out here they spend a lot of time actually out in the grasslands looking for rodents. And see, this one's got a warthog and youngster just behind it. Just going to finish off the talk with a last blast of a place called Kibale. In Kibale, I haven't got any pictures of chimpanzees, but Kibale is where we actually visit to go and try and see some chimpanzees, which I have to say were as impressive as the gorillas, particularly with their awesome strength and how they vocalize actually in the forest. But in the same sort of area, it's quite a demanding place to be, but nowhere near as difficult as the gorilla site. And so there is an opportunity of seeing lots of other primates here and wonderful butterflies such as this African purple emperor. Whilst we're staying at all these comfortable lodges around Uganda, there's an opportunity of seeing a number of birds around your lodges, including snowy-headed robin, or snowy-headed robin chat as it used to be called, and also the bronze sunbird, which is a local speciality in this side of East Africa. Common bulbul, yes, common bird, but in your lodges you're going to see nice views and close views of birds such as this. Just finishing the talk now, but just to also give you an indication that it's all about the wildlife. We do take time out to appreciate the culture. The Ugandans are a very friendly race of people. Clearly they've had some tough times in their previous history, but there's an opportunity to mix with the locals, to see some of the merchandise and stuff that's on offer, and to really sort of just drinking the culture of this wonderful country. Very friendly people indeed. So just concluding, nice little sunset over the forest in Uganda, and it's always been a very popular tour, and I'm quite sure that it'll be popular again to the future. So thank you very much for listening. A bit of a whistle-stop tour, but that's what we have to do on these things. Any questions, I'll try and answer them. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Neil, and thank you to all the rest of our panelists for this evening. I hope you've enjoyed their presentations just as much as I have. Kerrie, I think Larissa is keen to join you for a say brew sometime soon. So
yes, please. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Make that happen. So now we'll just enter our final part of the evening, when we'll answer a few of the questions that you've kindly been sending in over the last couple of hours or so. So I will get straight stuck in. And I'll start with Kerrie. I think you wanted to answer this one. We've got Lillian Hare, who said she would love to do a photography tour in Tanzania. Will we be running one?
Yeah, I've stolen this question. Paul may also have, he may or may not have an answer for this as well, but I would just say that we ran a really fabulous new photography trip to Kenya last November. And the whole group came back saying, will you please run a tour to Tanzania next? Because we had such a good time and we'd like to go over to Serengeti this time and do something similar. And our leader, who actually lives in Kenya, he was really up for it as well. So It's very much on my radar that I've got a little group of people that are desperate to go and a leader who wants to run it. So we need to get it organised. So that's a definite possibility. I don't know if Paul has got any ideas as well, if he's might have anything in pipeline or not. But yeah, basically watch the space for that.
Excellent. Yeah, we're certainly looking out for that one. So the next one is for you, Paul, as well. We have Maya, who's asked whether there are any tours that can coincide with the time of the wildebeest migration across the Mara River.
Not for our group tour. I was actually going to ping that back to you, Georgie, as the head of our tailor-made department, because we don't do any. I think it's about September time. They tend to cross the Mara up into the Masai Mara, and our Tanzania tours at present mostly go January, February, and November time. But I'm sure Georgie would be more than happy to put together a tailor-made trip for you at the crossing time.
Yeah, she certainly would. She would say that it can be quite difficult to predict exactly when the river crossings are going to happen. They do vary from year to year depending on sort of weather patterns and things like that. But we will do our very best to get you into the right place at the right time. And yeah, certainly with a tailor-made holiday, we'll try and give you your very best opportunities.
I would also add that we have a Kenya highlights holiday. We have a couple of departures a year, but we have one in September that is designed. Again, as Joy said, you know, we may not see the river crossing, but you're there at the right time of year to see the Great Migration.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, everyone. Kerrie, one from Larissa, who would like to know if there is any time of year that you would specifically recommend for the Seychelles that's not too humid and perhaps also gives chances for whale sharks.
Right, yes, I actually did some research on this whilst Neil was speaking. I mean, in terms of the humidity, there is a level of humidity all year round. It's always a bit humid, but when I was there September, it didn't feel that bad at all. As I said in my talk, it's easily very predictable depending on the monsoon, the trade winds. But traditionally, I think June, July, August should be the driest and the least humid months, and then gets a bit more September, October. But like when we go in September, October, it's still really nice, generally dry, not excessively humid at all. The research I did was on the whale sharks. So we've never seen them on our Naturetrek trips. We don't do any sort of boat trips that would enable you to see them. That's not to say they're not there when we're going. We're just not doing the right sort of trips specifically for whale sharks. My husband spent, unfortunate soul, spent 3 months in the Seychelles. It was just June, July, August. So I chat with him, and he'd had multiple whale shark sightings apparently. He went diving off Mahe, actually off Beauvalon where we stay, and dived with him there. He was in a microlight apparently, and then flew around looking at whale sharks from above. It all sounds very idyllic. And that, yeah, he said that he was there June to August, and I did Google it, and that is a good time. So yeah, I mean, maybe if you were thinking of doing our tour, then September you probably go out before. You probably still be there at a good time and go to Mahe and book a couple of excursions to specifically go and look for them. That sounds like a great thing to do to me. And then we'll have a Sabrew once the Naturetrek group arrives.
Perfect, sounds idyllic. So Neil, this is a nice one for you. Roger Toll will be visiting Uganda in June, and he's wondering what your top 3 tips are for trekking in Windy.
Okay, well, you will get a lot of briefing from the people that do it all the time about what to do. You need to have a lot of water, and there is an option. Normally, there's normally some guys there who actually will happily take your haversack for you. For a small amount of money. Definitely take them up on that. So it does get quite arduous in there, and you're not paying for very much for these guys. In fact, you'll probably tip them more than they would normally be paid. So take the option of having someone else to carry a pack for you, take plenty of water with you, and definitely have a camera. I would say sometimes it's low light, or can be low light in there. So if you want to get some really good memories, video capability would be something I would recommend.
Fantastic, some great trips. I've been lucky enough to do a couple of gorilla treks myself, and I would absolutely agree with both of those points. The other thing I would say is, as well as the having your camera, you can obviously get some fantastic photos. What I found is sometimes you can get a little bit too carried away with the camera, and sometimes it's just nice to sit there and just enjoy the moment. You've only got an hour, and it's going to be the most magical hour that you've ever spent. So yeah, just take some time to just enjoy it as well. But no, thanks very much for that, Neil. Another one for you, Kerrie, on the Seychelles. Is it sea too shallow to see cetaceans when moving around in the boats?
Yes, basically, we're never really going very far from the shore. So I guess you might see some dolphins if they've come in, but we're not typically out cetacean watching at all on this trip. Perhaps also the crossing from Mahe to Praslin, there's a chance. So possible, but it's not like some of our cruises, you know, when you're out in the deep waters during the day and specifically looking for cetaceans. It's not that sort of trip. And we were going to have an amazing trip to Aldabra, which was scheduled for February 2021, I guess it would have been, which would have gone to Mahe and then spent 20 days-ish going to Aldabra and back, and it was going to be incredible. But it was a victim of COVID, so that didn't happen. It may happen one day in the future again, I don't know. And then that would have had some amazing cetacean watching on it.
Fingers crossed we'll get that back
one
there
day
again soon.
Yeah,
we'll do it. So back over to you again, Neil.
Sure.
Is it possible to do the Uganda trip without visiting the gorillas?
Yes, definitely can. I mean, it is a steep amount of money to pay, but there is always an option that even if you do go to Bwindi and Penetrable Forest, there are lots of other things to look at as well. So if everybody else is trekking into the forest and you feel a little bit lonely, don't worry, because one of the local guides will take you off down one of the roads. The birding is really, really good. In fact, we didn't have time to really appreciate how good the birding was, but other people up there did. And you do get a very good chance of seeing some of the other primates actually along the tracks. So yeah, don't be worried if you really don't want to go into the gorillas, either due to fitness or cost or both. There's plenty of other things to do. And even if you don't want to do that, there's absolutely loads of wildlife just around the lodges where we stay. So there's absolutely loads to do and see.
Absolutely.
And just make it clear that if you don't do the gorilla trek, you would be paying for it.
No, quite.
You know, they're sort of $500 permits, but you that's not part of the tour cost, I don't think, is it? So
no, not at all. No,
you pay that for your trek. If you don't do the trek, you don't pay for permits.
No, that's right.
Yeah. Great. So Kerrie, Jeremy would like to know what are the typical numbers for tours on the Seychelles and Madagascar.
So Madagascar, we do maximum group size of 12. Yeah, all the tours. Seychelles, I'm dabbling with at the moment. It's 12 to 14, something like that. And yeah.
Excellent. And Neil, back to you.
Yep.
The age-old question: does Bwindi have leeches?
Well, I don't remember them. I was there in January, and I don't like leeches much, and I'm sure that I would remember if they were there. So I'm pretty confident in saying that in January there weren't any there. Whether there's there in September and October, I don't know. It has that sort of feel about it, the humidity and there clearly is moisture in the air, which is what the leeches love, but I don't recall them. So I'm afraid that's as much as I can say about that.
Yeah, I don't remember them being a particular problem for me either, and I think I did my one in Uganda in November. But it's just a case of if there are sort of biting insects and things like that. So just tuck your trousers into your socks and yeah, just be careful. But leeches, I don't believe, are a major problem.
I don't remember
I quite like leeches.
There's always
I'm fascinated by them. Great.
I don't actually remember any biting insects of any kind, but there are mosquitoes obviously in the whole part of Africa, so you always have to be cautious of those, perhaps more than anything else. But
that's it. I think I stuck my foot in an ant's nest, perhaps, so maybe that's why I remember it quite so vividly. Right, so getting towards the end of them now. Right. Somebody was asking about the sharing opportunities on our tours in general. So you can just sort of answer that by saying yes, on all of the tours that have been mentioned this evening, there are sharing opportunities. Recommend booking early, as we then advertise those shared spaces on our website. But there are also single room opportunities for a single room supplement on all of those tours as well. Sometimes only limited numbers, again, so good to get in there early, but that is definitely possible on all of these tours. Paul, Fiona's asked about current entry requirements for Tanzania. They are changing all the time at the moment, but if you could enlighten us to what things are at the moment.
Yeah, as you said, they're very, very fluid, but at the moment you do need to have a PCR test to get into Tanzania. 96 hours, I think, before departure from the UK. And then there's some paperwork to fill out as well. And there's also a compulsory rapid test when you arrive as well, which is, I think you have to pay $20 or something like that on arrival. But chances are, as with a lot of countries throughout the world, entry requirements are likely to be simplified over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing that in lots of other places at the moment. I think in Uganda recently that there was a test on arrival that was required, and that was scrapped last week. So hopefully, yeah, lots of these other countries will follow suit soon as well. Neil, one final for you. What other primates might we see whilst in Uganda?
Obviously, I mentioned the chimpanzees, which are very special in actual fact, and there's a couple of family groups that have now been habituated, and they were actually in the process of trying to habituate a third group while we were there. Definitely recommend going for those. It's nowhere near as much hard work. We were fairly fortunate on our trip. We had plenty of olive baboons, which are fairly sort of robust creatures you can see quite easily in fairly open landscapes. There were blue monkeys. We had a Hest's monkey as well. There's usual sort of vervets, and we also had the colobus. So I think it was red-tailed colobus and I think 2 other species as well. So there are plenty of primates to look at, and you do get quite a few of them actually in sort of edges of suburbia as well. So they're not always deep forest species.
That's great. Thank you very much, Neil. So I think that's pretty much mocked up all the ones from oh no, we've got another one here. Peter would like to know, will you be able to do night walks in the rainforest of Madagascar?
Oh, yes. So Madagascar for a long time now has had a ban on night walks in national parks, which people can read to take that you can't do night walks in Madagascar, which is not the case. You just can't do them in the national park itself, but you can do it in private reserves, around the forest edges. Even sort of walking along the roads outside can be really, actually almost easier because you're not worried about where your feet are, and there's plenty to see along the tree line roads. So we'll do night walks most, if not all, nights on a trip to Madagascar for those that want to, and there's lots to see.
Sounds fantastic. And what I think will be our last question for Paul, is yellow fever vaccination required for Ngorongoro or Tanzania in general?
Only if you go through a yellow fever country, like if you travel direct from, well, there's no flight direct from the UK, but if you take KLM, for example, from the UK via Amsterdam into Arusha, then you don't need to have a yellow fever certificate. If you come via Kenya, then there's sort of a little bit of confusion there. I would probably recommend that you do have one, even though technically you don't need to have one. Occasionally they do ask for them on arrival in Arusha. So as long as you're not going via a recognised yellow fever country, then you shouldn't need one.
Fantastic, that's great. Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks once again to all of our speakers this evening. It looks like everybody has really been enjoying your presentations. As always, if you've got any more questions that you haven't had time to ask today, or if you think of anything afterwards, do just drop us an email. We'll be more than happy to speak to you, or give us a call in the office. We'll be happy to discuss any of these tools in more detail there. So that's it for this evening, folks, but we will next be back on Monday, when we will be discussing Western and Northern Africa. I think Kerrie will be joining us again with a few more.
I'll be back.
Yeah. So please do join us then, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.